Let me just say that there's a lot of talk about pendulum swings and cycles and political trends in Latin America. I've always been, my sense is that it's becoming harder and harder to talk about pendulum swings. I think Latin America is swinging in lots of different directions at the same time. And so one has to be pretty cautious about generalizations. This is a region that's becoming much more differentiated, much more varied, I think, than it has been before. So it's very hard to sort of step back and say it's all going it's all going one direction or the other. I've also been a skeptic, and I was before, and I remain even more so, of using ideological labels to describe what's going on. I think the left and right are not very helpful. There are certain governments that have an ideological sort of aspect to them, but I think that that is less important, frankly, than just their capacity as institutions, governments, to deal with the pressures of globalization, to deal with greater demands and expectations of the population, which is all through Latin America. And I think we've had two big trends in the region over the last 10 years. One is greater attention to the social agenda, and the second is greater political distance from the United States. And not only in the case of Brazil, which we saw in the vote yesterday on Iran, but we've seen this over time, and we've seen this from a variety of Latin American countries. However integrated the U.S. is with Latin America, and in terms of migration and remittances and technology and investment and everything else, politically there is a greater breathing space, elbow room, distance, independence, and I think that's a trend that started a while ago and has continued. The same as the social agenda. I think that's happened in all countries as well. So what's interesting to look at today is to look at who have been the most popular presidents in Latin America in the last couple of years. And all of them have had elections or will be having elections. Michelle Bachelet in Chile, Alvaro Uribe in Colombia, Lula in Brazil, and Tabaré Vázquez in Uruguay. And in those four countries, what we see, and again, if you look at those countries, especially with the case of Uribe, you see the ideology is not the critical factor there. Very, very popular presidents, four popular presidents, four elections that have taken place or will be taking place. And what is striking in political terms is that there really seems to be broad agreement on fundamental issues, on economic policy, on security questions. There really is a framework and a sense of continuity. And this question of whether Piñera won or Frei won, now with Mocas or Santos in Brazil, and in Uruguay, that basically the countries were on a course that was going to continue fundamentally, with changes on the margins, certainly depending who would win, but pretty much continue on the same path. And that, I think, is a very striking thing. In Chile, Sebastián Piñera has continued many of the social policies of Ricardo Lagos and Michelle Bachelet. Antanas Mocas was somebody who was very much committed to, and still is committed to, the security policies of Alvaro Uribe, not negotiate with the FARC lest they stop kidnapping, which is almost the identical position. In Brazil, I think we see something similar with Serra and Dilma Rousseff. And these, I think, are what we, this, I think, is the major dominant trend in Latin America, in all of these, in these four countries. And at the same time, there is underneath some discontent that is worth paying attention to. If you look at the Chilean elections, you say, what was the most interesting thing, or most surprising thing about the Chilean elections was the showing of Ominami, the emergence of Carlos Enrique Ominami, somebody who represented a challenge to politics as usual in Chile. And Sebastián Piñera, if he's going to be successful, I think, and really have broad support and broad legitimacy, he needs to pay attention to the message that was sent by many young people, especially in Chile, that some of the traditional ways of doing politics needed to change.